Hello and welcome back to the latest episode of You Are My Boro. Myself, Tom Shaw, Scott Wilson from the Northern Echo as ever, and our special guest today, Mark Drury from BBC Tees, to reflect on what has been a rather eventful week on Teesside. Boro lost to Watford on Saturday, 1-0, the fourth defeat on the bounce, after which Michael Carrick's future position appeared uncertain, but confirmation then came on Monday that Carrick was going to continue as Boro head coach, and he'll be in the dugout at Bristol City on Friday night as Boro look to get back on track. We're recording this on Thursday morning. I was over at Rockliffe yesterday. Mark was there as well, so we'll have a chat about that. But let's start at the start of the week and the decision, really, that Michael Carrick was going to continue. He still retains the full backing of Chairman Steve Gibson. We'll come to you first, Scott. What was your reaction to that?
Slight surprise, I think. I think the mood music seemed to have shifted pretty strongly after the weekend, that where we'd kind of been talking about Michael Carrick's future in hypotheticals, really, it felt like the weekend was the moment when it all crystallised and, right, okay, it's decision time. Then obviously things kind of went quiet on Sunday, which you wondered if things were happening behind the scenes. Was there going to be movement? Was Monday morning going to be, decision time? Well, it was decision time, but it was decision time in that Steve Gibson and the hierarchy are going to back Michael Carrick. Still think he's capable of turning things round. Still think he's the right man to do it. Lots of talking points there, quite clearly. I think there needed to be a decision. It needed to be a hard decision one way or the other. What we didn't need was a week of uncertainty with no real clarity over the future direction or Michael Carrick's status. I think the fact that there's been a very strong backing of him, well, okay, it's now or never, isn't it? Can Michael Carrick, between now and the end of the season, get Middlesbrough into the playoffs, which is clearly the minimum requirement? The club's view is that he can. My view would be 50-50, I think, listen, Boro can get in the playoffs. How many times on this video have we said, take the top four out of this, and there's not a standout team in the rest of this league. It's not like Boro are in any way markedly inferior to the teams around them. Their results in the last month have been markedly inferior to those of the teams around them, and that's what Michael Carrick now needs to address.
You were obviously there on Saturday, Mark, and spoke to Michael Carrick after the game on Saturday. Same question to you, really. What was your reaction to what happened at the start of the week? And did you leave the Riverside on Saturday with the sense that might have been his last game in charge?
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I mean, you were there. It just felt that way, didn't it? There are moments, there are days when things just have the feel. The interview I did with him in the tunnel after the game, he came out and he said, his very first answer, he said, there was something about today. You could feel it, you could smell it. He doesn't talk like that normally. It was a different Michael Carrick. It was an altogether different experience speaking to him. And he sort of backtracked a little when I, revisited that with him. But it just felt done, didn't it? I think everybody there, the crowd, the press, the players, the management, it just had that feel that that's it. But the longer it went on Sunday, with nothing emerging in the way of news or an announcement, the more it became clear to me that I think actually they're going to stick with him. And then obviously we got confirmation on sort of late Monday morning lunchtime, didn't we? So yes, I am certainly, if you were asking me at 6:30 on Saturday, are you surprised? Yeah, really surprised. But 24 hours later, I think I'd realised, right, they're going to stick with him, or Steve Gibson is going to back him. The question is, how long does that hold for? Because as always, it's events, isn't it? Events will dictate. And there are two really tricky away games, or really tricky looking away games coming up. I mean, to be frank, the form Boro are in, every game's tricky at the moment. But these two, Friday night at Bristol City, Tuesday at Stoke, which is Boro's game in hand, they're pivotal, I think, certainly to Boro's playoff chances and perhaps to Michael Carrick's future. I mean, it's one thing to say, look, I'm backing him and I'm sticking with him, which hasn't been said publicly, but we are well aware that that's the position. But if it doesn't go the way you want it to, if it goes badly wrong over the next 2 games, then the pressure will increase on him.
And the challenge for Carrick now, Scott, is Carrick's the longest serving manager in the Championship. The challenge now, obviously, is to justify that faith.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, we're 2/3 into the season here, so it's not a small sample size that we're looking at, and there have clearly been recurring, deep-rooted problems right throughout the season that up until now, Michael Carrick hasn't been able to solve. So clearly, the obvious question is, well, why is he suddenly going to start solving them now? That's what he's got to come up with the answer to. Now, I think it's interesting that up until maybe a couple of games ago, Carrick's tactics, selection, approach, kind of everything was very, very constant. And you could make the argument that that was probably to his and for his detriment, but you knew pretty much what you were going to get. The interesting dynamic on Saturday was that kind of went out the window, didn't it? For the first time, it felt that the cards were just tossed up in the air. Where are they going to come down? That's the team. That's the selection. That's the tactics. And it was all a bit of a mess. So I think in the absolute immediate future, the interesting thing on Friday is, does he go back to the tried and tested, straightforward 4-2-3-1, players where they've been for pretty much all the season, and just hope that things click? Or are we going to see more of, I guess, the experimentation that we saw at the weekend, which didn't really work? But I guess answers the question, well, do you need to do something different? I think that's a really interesting question that Michael Carrick and the rest of the coach and staff have been wrestling with this week. I suspect he'll go back to the tried and tested. I think the side we'll see tomorrow night will be much more like the side that's been lining up for Boro for much of this season, but we'll see.
Yeah, the changes point is interesting. So against Sunderland, he made 5 changes to his lineup. 2 changes against Sheffield United, 4 against Watford. Now, as we're going back a couple of years now to his playoff run in his first season in charge, but how many times in that season did we go unchanged, one change, unchanged? This is a world away from that, and that gives you a glimpse into what is possibly a bit of a scrambled mind at the moment.
And I guess the worry for Carrick is, for all the same issues have been prevalent throughout the campaign, conceding too many goals, conceding soft goals, conceding goals in key moments, not taking advantage of spells of dominance in games. Boro have played well, and that was the frustration for the first half of the season, wasn't it? We can see how good this Boro side can be. They were playing well, but were finding a way to lose games. Watford away, how on earth did they lose that? Norwich away, how did they only draw that? Sheffield Wednesday, they were untouchable for 25 minutes, half an hour, weren't they? The worry for Carrick must be that against Sheffield United, Boro looked way off it last Wednesday. And the performance on Saturday was just very underwhelming.
Yeah. They've lost the mojo, haven't they? Basically. And it's got to be found quickly. And I think the problem on Saturday was that, as far as the wider picture is concerned, that it felt like everybody had lost faith. The fans had lost faith in his ability to do that. And, you know, do you ever win that back? That is a huge task. So that's why Friday is so important. That's why next Tuesday at Stoke is so important against Mark Robins, a manager who had his number when he was Coventry boss. He's got to prove to the fans and to Steve Gibson that he can, with the squad he's got, which should be good enough. I absolutely agree. It should be good enough to reach the playoffs. I'd argue it's not as good a squad now as it was at the start of the season in certain positions, but it should still be good enough to reach the playoffs. But it's got to start now, because it'd be interesting to see how many points you need to reach the playoffs this season, because usually it's 70 plus. The way everybody's cutting their throat below the top 4 this season, it might be a bit lower, but still, let's say it's 70 points. Boro are a long way from that. I mean, we were speaking on the radio, Don, weren't we, about what's required. They might need 8 wins in the 14 games that remain. That's a hell of a tall task for a side who have only won back-to-back games on 2 occasions in the league. this season. So players who've come in, who needed to hit the ground running and who haven't yet, have got to find their feet quickly, or he's got to ignore them and go back to the ones, as you said earlier, the tried and trusted, and hope that they can deliver for him. And the way the Championship is, once you get on a run, be it a good one or a bad one, it can continue. But right now, Boro are on just the worst possible kind of run. And I don't know whether this is an issue that's fixed on the pitch, on the training ground, or actually in a room where you sit them all down together and you have it out and you wear any concerns, issues, questions that they might have. But he's got to find a way of getting the 11 he picks to play for 90 minutes, and conceding goals is just a recurring problem. Because even look at Sunderland. The Sunderland game was Boro's season in microcosm for me. Yeah. Half an hour of good attacking football, making chances, passing up really good chances. But then when the game turned, they seemed incapable of turning that tide back in their favour. Even with the equaliser from Hayden Hackney, it just got away from them again. And you know, is it unlucky fashion, that own goal? They certainly cut their own throat. But getting hold of games and not letting go is what's going to be the difference between making it or not making it.
The new signings. Sorry,
I was going to say that, Scott. Yeah, what do you make of that point Mark makes there? Because we asked Michael Carrick yesterday about the signings and the fact that they've come in at a difficult time. They've come in when Boro are in a bit of a slump, when there's obviously been not an overhaul, but more ins and outs than probably we expected in January. What do you think of the weeks ahead? Does he? Illing Jr. has been in and out. Whittaker's been in and out. Iheanacho's played up front and then played as a number 10. Giles was in, then he was out. What does he do moving forward? Yeah. Does he play him? Does he put faith in him? Or does he stick with the players he knows from the first half of the season?
Well, I think that's the immediate decision he has to make here and now ahead of Friday, isn't it? You know, Ryan Giles, Neto Borges, kind of know what we're going to get from Neto Borges. We know where his ceiling is, but we also know where his floor is. He's been taken out of the side for a couple of games. Ryan Giles comes in. Yeah. You know, the reservations that I think, you know, some of us had and clearly probably the club had earlier in the summer, hence why he didn't sign in the summer. Well, they've been laid bare, haven't they? So does Michael Carrick now write that off as a failed experiment already and just put Borges in there because you know what you're going to get? Exactly the same up front with Iheanacho and Tommy Conway. Iheanacho, yeah, on paper, looks like a really good signing. Well, if he's going to wander around like he did at the weekend, you play Tommy Conway ahead of him every week. Illing Jr. is probably a little bit different. He's been played here, there, and everywhere already. Where is actually his best role? Where does Carrick see a place for him in the team? Well, at the minute, you wouldn't be hanging your hat on him. Whittaker felt like he would be just a logical replacement for Doak. Well, it kind of started out like that, but it hasn't gone there at the minute. I mean, you know, these players that have come in, ideally, you'd give them a bit of time, you'd bed them in, you'd in and out, one in, one out. Boro do not have that time. Michael Carrick is going to have to decide here and now, is he going to hang his hat on the players that have come in January, or actually, is he going to go back to the players that for the first half of the season have, in big chunks of games, got Boro into decent positions, but then have also been found wanting, and clearly we know that there's flaws within them. I suspect he'll go with the tried and tested, because I think when the real you kind of next on the block and you need the result, managers right across football tends to do that. But I think that's going to be very interesting. I think it'll be really telling on Friday what that team selection. Does Giles come in? Does he an actual play?
Particularly at the back. Particularly at the back, Scott, I think. Because now Dale Fry was ill, wasn't he, against Watford? But we were told yesterday that he's recovered. So does he play? Does he play, or is it George Edmondson? Now, Michael Carrick, you know, he's a big fan of George Edmondson. He wanted George Edmondson here, and he's got him. He wanted Ryan Giles here. He's got him. But come the crunch, and it is the crunch on Friday after Watford and after the weekend that we've had, who does he go with? Luke Ayling at right back. I mean, Luke Ayling looks like he's got old overnight. He's had he's just been so out of form. And, you know, the way Enzo Lafay destroyed him for Sunderland, it was painful to watch. So, yeah, Luke Ayling's got experience and he's had the captain's armband, but Anthony Dijksteel's been playing better. So many decisions right throughout the team. And it will be, as Scott says, it'll be a really interesting team sheet.
What do you think? What do you think? Not he should do, but what do you think the back four will be on Friday night?
Oh God! Do you know what? I genuinely
Edmondson again at centre half.
Do you know what? I haven't got a clue, honestly. And that is my gut feeling is it probably will be George Edmondson, but I think that's part of the problem. None of us know. None of us know.
I'm not sure at left back.
Well,
and I'm not sure at right back. I think it should be Dijksteel. I think it should be Borges. I think it should be Vandenberg and Fry. That'd be my back four on Friday night. But
I wouldn't necessarily argue with you, but I wouldn't be placing any money on any combination. That's the thing.
The press conference yesterday then, so obviously with it being a Friday night game, Carrick spoke to the press on Wednesday rather than his usual Thursday slot. So he did a separate interview with Mark, as he always does with BBC Tees first. But so the quote from the written section when he comes in and speaks to us afterwards, and obviously he was asked about the week that's gone and job security and the backing from Steve Gibson. He was asked whether he feared the sack after Saturday's game. He said, "It's not something I think about in that manner. What's the point? It's not going to get me anywhere. It's never something that I've done in the past. It's what can I do today and tomorrow to be better for the next game. That's the ultimate aim. That's my responsibility. If I'm starting to think about other things, then my head's gone and then you're finished." And then he was asked about Steve Gibson's backing. And he said, "Honestly, for me personally, it doesn't change what I do. I don't need the sympathy from anybody. I don't look for that. I don't look I look to myself to get on with it. I feel the support. I understand the situation. I get where it's at, but it doesn't change my mood. Honestly, for me, it would be pretty pathetic to go searching for reassurance. I'm a head coach of a fantastic football club. I don't need someone else to tell me you'll be all right." You said, Mark, earlier in the vid that some of the language used by Carrick after Saturday's game wasn't very Michael Carrick. Well, I thought the same yesterday.
It felt like a very determined performance in the sense that he decided before he came in to speak to me and to speak to you, this is how I'm going to present myself. And I'm going to be very upbeat. I'm going to be bullish. I'm going to be, I don't need sympathy. I don't need any help. Do you know what I mean? It sort of felt like I could almost imagine that the pep talk. Do you know what I mean? Right, get in there, show them, and let's get on with it. Go and get the job done. You can almost hear it, can't you? So it did feel like a little bit of a performance. Now, a lot of football management is, as we know, particularly when speaking to us. But it was a marked difference from post-match on Saturday. So let's see how that translates on Friday night. But he has been different this season. We have seen more of I suspect, the real Michael Carrick at times, even in his demeanour on the touchline. But yeah, it felt, I mean, I don't know what you felt on, but it felt to me like he'd come in there with a definite sort of line he was going to take, and he knew the impression he wanted to give. Yeah,
I mean, there was Craig from the Gazette had asked him about, obviously Carrick's demeanour is very calm, often talks about being calm, but Craig had said, that doesn't mean you don't care. And his answer to that was really quite strong, and bullish is the word you used as well, wasn't it? And I think he said, I haven't got the quote in front of me, I see my family once a week. That's care, that's passion. And we've said before, Scott, haven't we? And I Talk Aranka used to be like this, didn't he? Where the best press conferences were where, and I know we're coming at it from like a quote, professional work point of view. Wow, that's a good line. That'll make a good story. But equally, I think the fans would say the same, but with certain subjects. The best press conferences where Carrick has been when he's backs been the wall, or when he's been questioned. I remember Zach Steffen. He was really, really good on Zach Steffen when he was questioned about Steffen. When he's kind of questioned or criticised on certain things, he sometimes, not all the time, comes out firing.
I think for the last month or so, it's felt like he's been kind of dancing this difficult line tightrope where I think Michael Carrick's default setting is a high level of confidence, a high level of I know the answers, kind of why am I being asked this? And that yeah, a little bit of arrogance maybe, but I think it's more just that level of belief, that level of, you know, I'll get this right. I'm doing the right things. I have to believe that. I have to believe this is going to turn. I do believe it. All of that. But in the back of his mind, I think there is an acknowledgement that if you just carry on saying that when you lose and lose and losing, then you come across eventually as idiotic. And so there has to also be a level of, yeah, this isn't good enough. It's not working. This can't carry on. All of that side. That side of it, I think, comes much less easily to Michael Carrick. Partly because probably throughout his career, he's never really had to do that. And that's not the Man United way of doing it, is it? And let's be honest, he's spent a decade there and he's been brought up. You know, I think a lot of the way Michael Carrick looks at the football world is through the prism of having been a Man United player for a decade and a half, whatever it was, and won everything and all of this. So I think that kind of humble, hands up, this can't go on side of it doesn't come naturally to him. He clearly doesn't want to be someone who criticises players, exposes rifts, says anything publicly that could damage the way he's perceived within the dressing room and all that. That's not him either at all. So I think there comes a time when fans just don't want the positives. They need a bit of reality. And I think that's where Carrick has found it hard in this last month or so, because that side of it, I don't think comes naturally to him.
Middlesbrough isn't Manchester United. That's what I think he needs to, the penny needs to drop. This isn't Manchester United. It's a completely different situation, and it requires different skills or different responses.
Yeah.
And I think one of the problems has been he is clearly a laid-back fella. I don't think there's any dispute in that. But he clearly tries to get across as well the image of calm all the time. But I think one of the problems, not just now, is that can come across or is dismissive or is seen as being dismissive to certain subjects. So he talked again and again and again yesterday about perspective, didn't he? The need for perspective. It's not the end of the world. But I know clearly it isn't. But if you're a fan who's paid God knows how much over the course of the last month to go to Portsmouth and Preston, and you're going to Bristol tomorrow, and you're going to Swansea in a few weeks, well, no, it's not the end of the world. But it's clearly something that you're deeply unhappy with, and something that needs fixing and needs addressing. And you don't want to be told, do you? You don't want to be dismissed with that sort of response. I think that is something that hasn't benefited, that hasn't helped him in press conferences, probably over the last 2 years, but certainly in recent weeks.
Yeah, I mean, with a lot of things he said, I think particularly post-match, I think back to Portsmouth, for example, you know, when it's not about being in or out of the playoffs. Well, the sort of universal response was, flipping well is, mate. Do you know what I mean? When people hear it. And I'm not sure if he's learned yet that the effect his words have on the fan base. Maybe the penny is starting to drop, but that doesn't come across well. And you know, people, to a lot of what he says, you know, well, there's loads of games left. Well, it's almost like everyone's going, well, go on then. If it's that easy, go on. Just start winning them then. So when you have that persona, and I don't think he particularly enjoys it, is the truth. I don't think he likes talking. Like Scott said, I'm not sure he particularly appreciates being questioned by you two, by me, by Craig, by anyone really, because what do we know? I think
he doesn't like doing it, does he? That's
no. So, but unfortunately, it's part of the job, and you've got to, whether you like it or not, because when you speak to us, you're speaking to the fans. And in the last couple, it's taken this horrendous run for him to actually show a bit of understanding of the position he's in and the need to communicate only a little, but a little more openly. So we'll see. We'll see what the remaining games bring on that front.
Yeah, because I think that's interesting. Clearly Michael Carrick will view his job as coaching the team. He's the head coach of the football club. He coaches the team. He deals with the dressing room. He deals with the players. That's fine. But whether he likes it or not, whether anyone likes it or not, as the figurehead of a football club, which manager, head coach, whatever you call them, they're the ones that are sat in front of us, sat in front of the fans see the videos, all of that. Managing the situation around the football club is a massive part of your job. I look back and, Michael Beale, who me and Dom covered at Sunderland, clearly a very talented coach. Everybody raves about his coaching, his track record of being an academy coach, all of that. Within 3 months, it was less, 2 months. It was very, very obvious he did not have a clue about how to manage all that swirls around a football club. And he lost the fans. He lost the respect of those around him. He just lost the situation. It engulfed him. And I think there's been times when that's happened really with Michael Carrick, because he just hasn't been able to, he's either been unwilling or unable to kind of control that wider narrative. And I do think I know we're going to say it's important because that's our job to be part of that narrative and to tell that narrative. But it is important. It really is important. It's probably even more important now where fans are all over social media. They see everything. They hear everything. They've got the voice. We all know straight away what kind of fans are thinking and the mood around the club, if you like. I think all of that is really important. And I think if Michael Carrick in the next 20 years is going to be a hugely successful manager wherever it is, that's what he's got to get better at.
And he hasn't resorted to setting up a ghost Twitter account yet, though, has he?
Not yet. No, not yet.
Do we know of?
He's not a Twitter man, Michael Carrick, is he? Goodness me, he's not.
He has an easy ride of it, though, doesn't he, Carrick? From there's a couple of locals there every week. There's yourself, Mark, or someone from Tees. If you were to go up the road to Newcastle, where there's a national press pack who need lines to go back to their desk and fill the paper the next day, or if you were going to go to West Ham or Crystal Palace, teams that have been linked with Carrick in the past, you don't get away with that, do you? When there's reporters there who need a line because they've got their desk ringing, saying, what am I going to get? What am I going to get from you for tomorrow?
Well, I mean, if as and when that happens, it will be a culture shock for him, I think. Because again, he's been a player with Manchester United and a player with England, but I think he probably only did 3 press conferences when he was in caretaker charge. So if he ends up getting one of those jobs, and there's no guarantee he will, but if he does, then that will come as a real shock to the system and not a particularly pleasant one.
Bristol City then on Friday night. What? It hasn't been the happiest of hunting grounds for Boro over the years.
I do love an understatement.
Yeah. What do we reckon? You spoke to Tommy Conway, by the way. We'll quickly touch on that before we finish, Mark. But what do we reckon on the game first? Because one thing Carrick has said on Saturday and again yesterday is he needs results. He needs to find a result.
He needs a win.
He
needs a win. He knows he needs a win. Everybody knows he needs a win. And for some reason, in recent years, no matter how good or bad Bristol City have been, and they've generally been pretty mediocre, haven't they? But they have been a real problem for Boro. They've won 4 of the last 6 meetings between the sides. The other 2 were draws. In recent times, that's the sort of record that makes you think, Boro win that. Just because, But actually, those are the games that he hasn't been winning. Those are the games that a lot of fans have gone, maybe his luck's running out, when he's really needed a win. We've spoken about it often enough. When he's really needed a win, he hasn't got one. And that's why Boro have now found themselves in the position they are in mid-table. But if he can pick the right team, whatever that looks like, and if they can be that bit more solid, because they're capable of scoring, not just at Bristol City, but everywhere they go. They're capable. Right. The record shows that. If they can just cut out the stupid mistakes and the ridiculous decisions that they've made individually and collectively, defensively, then surely they're good enough to beat Bristol City. But if Bristol City score first, then, think back, they're not Sheffield United, but think back to Bramall Lane and how it felt there. Boro got that gift of a penalty, but again, when the game goes against them, they are brittle, they are fragile. So there has to be a bit of backbone, and it has to start now because he needs a win.
I think whether we like it or not, if you gave the Bristol City management a pen and a bit of paper and said, right, write me down 3 teams you'd like to be playing at home this weekend, I suspect because of everything that is going on and the run they're on, Middlesbrough would feature in that list of 3 teams. And that's what Boro have to overcome. At the minute, teams will be looking at Boro and saying, right, if we get into this lot, they'll fall like a pack of cards. Yes, they've got some nice footballers. Yes, they'll have 10 or 15 minutes in the game. But as long as we see that out, once we get on top and get stuck into them, the game's won. That's what Boro have to overcome, because clearly that's a horrible tag to have round your neck. But at the minute, it's the one Boro have got.
A nice upbeat half an hour there to preview the Bristol City.
Shall I tell you about Tommy Conway now?
Yes, go on. Yeah.
Well, funny enough, when you talk about tone and Michael Carrick, the way he presented himself. Well, I spoke to Tommy Conway before that press conference. I thought he got it bang on. I mean, if you haven't heard the interview with him, I'd have a listen, because he put that social media post out, hadn't he, in the wake of Saturday's defeat, basically saying, look, we understand, we get your frustrations, we'll do everything we can to put it right, we will get there, essentially. And he spoke to me about how much it's hurt, how much it affects him mentally. He says he knows he can speak for the entire dressing room, that they are working so hard, that they really do appreciate the support they get. He says he's been blown away by Boro's travelling support. And he couldn't believe when he went to Plymouth and heard it was sold out. He said, we didn't do it. When I was at Bristol City, we didn't do that. But he's just saying he is desperate. And he feels like that it's possibly written for him to score the winning goal on Friday night, because he's going to get dog's abuse, isn't he? He's going to get absolute dog's abuse, because, as he said, I didn't leave in the way I wanted to. I'd been there since I was 7. I know it wasn't great. It wasn't what I wanted. And he knows he's going to get it. But Tommy Conway is one player who you can look at and go, well, he's not going to hide. He's not going to wilt. He'll go out there and lead from the front. So I thought that was a really well-judged interview from him. Interviews don't get you points, but they can help. They can help the mood. And I think he did his bit there for the players. So let's see if they can do their bit on the pitch.
We've talked about it before, Scott, haven't we? I mean, he's had a really impressive first season when you consider the goals he's scored and the time he's had out of action as well with injuries. But he's also been impressive off the pitch, hasn't he? We were speaking about it on the radio last night when he put himself up to speak to the media after missing the penalty at Norwich, and obviously Boro ended up losing the points there. We've talked a lot about leaders this season, haven't we? Conway strikes me as the right type of character you want in your dressing room.
Which surely is why, for all we've talked about selection decisions and chopping it, Tommy Conway has to start up front for Boro on Friday night, and he has to start up front for Boro between now and the end of the season for me, because that's exactly it. He's got that championship kind of experience around him, but he's got a point to prove as well. He'll be stinging, as Mark said there, about the fact that he's going back to Bristol City, and it's not. There's reasons for it. He's had injuries and everything, but the brutal reality is the move's not worked out in the way that he would have wanted. He's not going back with Boro 30 points clear of Bristol City and clearly a no-brainer of a move and all that kind of thing. He will be going back smarting, and he'll be feeling that for the rest of the season. And Boro have to use that to drive them on. And like I say, he has to start ahead of Ian Atcho on tomorrow night.
Conway 1-0. If the boot was on the other foot, we'd be saying nailed on.
It's the nil bit I'm wondering about. I think he'll score. But what odds would you get on Boro keeping a clean sheet? So I suspect they're going to have to score more than once to win the game.
Well, let's see. Well, we're there on Friday night. Obviously, we'll have full build-up, reaction analysis. Obviously, Mark will be there as well. If you can't watch the game, or if you're not going down, then you can listen on BBC Tees as ever. Thanks as ever for your support on this channel. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Do subscribe, do rate and review. And we'll be back next week with hopefully a lot more upbeat a video or pod reflecting on 2 positive results after Stoke. Let's see. Thanks for watching. Take care.